Night and on the radio tomorrow morning. Ed, take it away.
We will be there, Laura. Thank you. We begin with this Fox News alert. Lordy, there are more tapes. Breaking tonight, Katrina Pearson is back here with us live for a second crack at denying the explosive allegations by Omarosa Manigault Newman. Last night, Pearson was here to sharply and unequivocally deny she ever said during any campaign conference call that candidate Donald Trump had used the N-word. So imagine my surprise when I woke up this morning to find out Omarosa had given CBS News an audio tape showing Pearson had in fact said on at least one call the future president used the N-word and they needed to figure out a way to spin it. So, did Pearson tell the truth last night? We'll press her live in a moment, fair and balanced. And later, longtime Trump supporter Roger Stone is also here live. As Paul Manafort's edging closer to a conclusion in the trial, there are fresh reports that Robert Mueller is now zeroing in on Stone. Will this give more grist to critics who charge the special counsel is simply out of control? Plus, we'll talk exclusively to Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke. He's fresh off a heartbreaking tour of Northern California with some details about the damage done by those deadly wildfires. Hello, and welcome to Fox News at Night. I'm Ed Henry, in for Shannon Bream. One of our viewers sent me a tweet today demanding to know how covering Omarosa helps our economy, stops Iran's aggression, or cuts illegal immigration. She was right. Omarosa doesn't impact any of that, which begs the question, why has the president now tweeted 6 times in the last few days on Omarosa? So tonight we'll cover real issues like those wildfires I mentioned, the attempted terror attack in London, and several major primaries tonight in this big midterm election year. But we start with the tale of the tapes that have caught the White House's attention. And our correspondent, Trace Gallagher, breaks it all down. Good evening, Trace.
Good evening, Ed. As Omarosa Manigault Newman continues promoting her new book, which came out today, she remains involved in a very caustic back and forth with President Trump and the White House. The Trump campaign has now filed an arbitration complaint against her, alleging she is in breach of a 2016 confidentiality agreement. This is all related to claims made by Manigault Newman in her new book. Meantime, the president set off new accusations of sexism and racism with his tweet quoting, "When you give a crazed, crying lowlife a break and give her a job at the White House, I guess it just didn't work out. Good work by General Kelly for quickly firing that dog." Later on MSNBC, Manigault Newman responded to the president's tweet. Watch.
I think that it just shows you that if he would say that publicly, what else would he say about me privately? He has absolutely no respect for women, for African Americans.
We should note that during her book tour, Omarosa hasn't exactly bolstered her credibility. She has made numerous contradictory statements, including her claim that when they worked together on The Apprentice, Donald Trump was caught on tape using multiple racial slurs. She has offered no evidence, and Apprentice creator Mark Burnett says the claim is false. But today, White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders was pressed on the issue and said she can't guarantee the president has never been recorded using the N-word, but that she's never heard it. She also weighed in on the president calling Omarosa a dog. Listen.
Look, the president, this has absolutely nothing to do with race and everything to do with the president calling out someone's lack of integrity.
And quickly, Ed, back to the allegation of Donald Trump using a racial slur. Today, former Trump campaign manager Corey Lewandowski said he never heard that word and there was never a conversation about a tape. Ed.
Trace Gallagher starting off tonight. Thanks, Trace. The former spokeswoman for the 2016 Trump campaign, current senior advisor to his 2020 campaign, Katrina Pearson, as I promised, back tonight live to comment. It's great to have you 2 nights in a row, but let's try to get this straight tonight so we don't have to have you a 3rd night in a row.
Let's do it.
So apparently Omarosa was watching us last night because I understand, I just got an email that she told Trevor Noah at The Daily Show, she heard you tell me you knew nothing about a conference call, talking about whether the president used an N-word. You said this was a movie script. So she says she released at least one of these audio tapes to show you lied to us.
Well, look, first of all, that's not true as well. So there are 2 things that occurred last night in our discussion. You had read for me a book excerpt that I had not seen because her book had not come out yet. And you referenced me having been speaking to the president about this issue, and that is false. We have transcripts today of the tapes that Omarosa released that proves proves that to be true. Also, I will say that Omarosa actually played CBS today, Ed.
How so?
She has been on this campaign trail, or on her little book trail, and in her interview with Chuck Todd and Savannah Guthrie,
That's
she made a
NBC,
specific claim
Yeah.
about me. And that's what I have been addressing in all of my interviews.
Okay, so let's just get to the point here. Let's play the clip from last night. I was asking you about the president talking to longtime aide Lynn Patton about whether or not he had used the N-word. Let's play that and we'll get to the facts. A longtime Trump aide reported she asked Trump about it on the plane, specifically whether it was possible such a tape might exist, and he said no. Then she, Katrina, asked him what he wanted her to do, and he said put it to bed. Katrina cursed and said he said it. Did that happen?
No, Ed, that did not happen. It sounds like she's writing a script for a movie. You know, I've already been out there talking about this. That is absolutely not true.
So you referenced a moment ago that the second time I said she last night, I said she, Katrina Pearson, when the book says she, Lynn Patton.
Yes.
So I apologize. That was an honest mistake. That does not change the substance, Katrina, of the very fact that you're now claiming today there were two different phone calls, and you were talking about one with Jason Miller.
Well, first, I'm not claiming that. I'm not claiming that, Ed.
Okay,
CBS
well, you told me that several times today. that
CBS
had one
released
tape.
2 calls.
Okay, so let me get to the facts. I don't want to get to side issues. Bottom line is you're saying there's one call with Jason Miller, one without Jason Miller. We'll get to Miller in a second. The one without Jason Miller on CBS, Omarosa says, according to a transcript you provided me of part they have not aired yet, Omarosa says, yeah, it's out there, meaning the N-word tape. It's just, and Katrina Pearson cuts in, yeah, he said it, bleep, okay. That is roughly what she said in the book, that you cursed, as I asked you last night, and you said he said it. He used the N-word. You denied that to me last
Absolutely.
night.
You know why? Because I'm refuting a claim that Omarosa made, and I'll say it again, on Chuck Todd and Savannah Guthrie.
Let's not talk about Chuck Todd. Let's talk about this tape.
We're talking
Hang
about
on. Pardon me. I'm going to be polite to you, but no, I'm not going to do side issues. Pardon me.
Let me tell you what I'm refuting. She made a claim that I said.
You said he said it.
Absolutely
You told me you never said that.
Absolutely
You're
not.
on
That
tape.
is not what we were talking
But you
about.
were on tape.
That is not the question that you were asking me. This was in regards to a specific discussion. Check the tapes of what she said on Chuck Todd and Savannah Guthrie. She specifically said that I said and confirmed that Donald Trump said a derogatory term on a conference call with Jason Miller. That did not happen.
We'll get to Jason Miller in a second.
That is what I'm refuting. What happened today, Ed, what happened today is Omarosa submitted 2 different tapes to CBS,
I'm going
and
to
they were
explain 2 different tapes.
conflated
We're not going to get
into
sidetracked
one.
by 2 different
No, we
tapes.
have to.
We're not going to be sidetracked. No. Pardon me. It's our show. Hang on one second.
That there are 2 different tapes.
I will admit there's 2 tapes. I'm going to explain them. But first of all, I'm going to lead this discussion. And the fact of the matter is today you clarified and said, no, I just said, yes, he used the N-word because I wanted to move the conversation along with
That was
Omarosa.
a different discussion.
Okay, there's multiple discussions. Why didn't you, if that's the truth, why didn't you tell me, Ed, you know, I don't know all the details of this book. I haven't seen it. But I did say, yes, he used the N-word to move the conversation along.
Because
you didn't say that last night. You changed the story today.
The question I was asked about this conference call with Jason Miller, the answer is no, that was not said. The transcript is right here, both calls. The first call that you're talking about where she's claiming that I said that was in a totally different call where she was arguing with Lynn Patton about the existence of this tape.
Okay.
But let me explain something to you.
I'll give you one last thing, yeah.
Omarosa has been using this tape to manipulate people. She is a bully. She is pushy. She is a dog with a bone with this tape.
You keep
and
using
people
dog. We're going to get to that in a moment too.
People placated her in personal
Let's go to
discussions.
facts and not attacks. Okay?
Absolutely.
So you keep talking about Jason Miller. That's the second call. And based on
That's the call she's referencing.
Okay, so let's get to that call. Let's get to the substance. On that call, you say in your statement today that basically we were just sifting through rumors.
Yes.
And the Jason Miller call, he was a campaign aide. In fact, we have the transcript that you provided. Yeah. Okay, and here's what is on the tape. Jason Miller says, it's kind of tough to go out and draft something, meaning a statement about whether the president used the N-word, when you don't even know what the context is. You know, I hate to start emailing stuff around when we're just not. That's sifting through rumors.
You don't want to do it.
Guess what Katrina Pearson says?
Yes.
It's true. So you were not just simply...
That's true. You don't want to go around making these accusations and coming up with statements. It's true. That is very true.
No,
and if you back up, Lynn Patton says the same thing.
Hang on, you just misquoted yourself. You just said, I said, that's true. No, you said, it's true.
The audio said it's true. That's true. You don't want to make those kinds of claims. If you back up, Lynn Patton says that's true because we're actually talking about there is no evidence. We are saying in this transcript that there is absolutely nothing we can find. There's just rumors and innuendo about this tape, and it is true that we cannot move forward with this without it.
So you just used the term dog. The president called Omarosa a dog. I was talking to you before the show. You have a son. You always, in private, talk to him about him. You love him very much. I'm going to leave the president out of this. Do you raise your son to call a woman, any woman in this country, a dog?
Well, this isn't about my son.
No,
we're talking
I'm not going to let you do that.
No, we're talking about someone who built her entire career
okay, we'll leave your
off
son
of this man.
Pardon me.
This is a personal issue between Donald Trump and Omarosa.
Let's leave your son out of it then, and we'll leave the president out of it. Would it be appropriate for me to call a woman a dog? Yes or no?
It depends on what she did to you, Ed. It depends on what she did to you. I don't know what she did to you. Omarosa bit the hand that fed her. To me, that's what a dog is. The president has referenced several men as dogs, like Ted Cruz, like Mitt Romney, like Brett Bozell. He has said this to a number of people. This is not just for Omarosa.
Take off your Trump hat. As a woman, you think it's appropriate for any man to call a woman a dog? Really?
Look, as a woman, as a strong black woman, I think everyone should be able to defend themselves the best way they see fit, Ed.
Katrina Pearson, I appreciate you coming back.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Our other top story tonight, the trial of Paul Manafort took another unexpected turn today. The former Trump campaign chair decided not to take the stand. His attorneys decided not to present any evidence. Our correspondent Kristen Fisher is here with why the defense rested their case. Good evening, Kristen.
Hey, Ed. Well, the prosecution called on more than 24 witnesses over the course of 2 weeks. Today, the defense started and rested its case without calling a single witness, including the man standing trial, Paul Manafort. Now, his legal team says they did not mount a defense because they believe the prosecution has not met its burden of proof. So now it's time for closing arguments. They'll start tomorrow morning. Each side has been given up to 2 hours, though the judge has urged them to use less time. So it's possible that the jury could get the case as early as tomorrow afternoon.
The defense thinks they made a strong case. They've argued that Rick Gates is not a reliable witness, that there's holes in his testimony. He's the heart of the prosecution's case. At the same time, you know, the prosecution had a ton of witnesses. They presented a lot of evidence. It's going to be an uphill run for Mr. Manafort.
But the judge in this case has not made things easy for the prosecution. Today, they haggled over what to tell jurors about the judge's opinionated remarks from the bench. At one point, the judge asked the prosecution point blank, "Do you think I made any such comments?" The lead prosecutor responded, "Yes." The judge then asked for an example, to which the prosecutor replied, "There were many," but he specifically cited a moment during Rick Gates' testimony where Manafort's former deputy said that his boss was good at keeping track of the money, and the judge replied, well, Manafort couldn't be that good at it because Gates allegedly stole money from him. So today, a slight victory, though, for the prosecution, Ed. The judge said that he will tell the jury to ignore what he said, to ignore those more opinionated remarks, and instead focus on the evidence.
All right, Kristen, let's focus in on something else. There are these reports out there that longtime Trump advisor Roger Stone might be next in Mueller's crosshairs. What are you hearing about that tonight?
Well, it's looking increasingly likely. I mean, Stone's come under scrutiny for his connections during the campaign to WikiLeaks and Guccifer 2.0, who Mueller's team is now claiming was a digital front for Russian intelligence officers. And now the special counsel is bringing in a growing number of people from Stone's inner circle to testify before a grand jury, including that Manhattan madam.
I don't know anything about Russian collusion. I didn't even work for Roger in 2016. You know, if I'm being brought in to testify about his character or about maybe some of the other people there, you know, I've answered honestly.
And the fact that Stone himself has not been called in for questioning is another clear sign that he could potentially be a subject or a target of this investigation. Ed?
All right, Kristen Fisher, appreciate the reporting. So is Republican strategist Roger Stone next on the special counsel's list? Stone joins us now live to tell us what he knows and what he doesn't. Good evening, Mr. Stone.
Thank you, Ed. Great to be here.
We just heard that clip from Kristen Davis. She was known as the Manhattan Madam. She got in trouble, says she's reformed her life, and you've hired her to do work. She's trying to turn things around, and she basically says that somehow the special counsel, who's supposed to be looking at alleged Russian collusion, brought her in for questioning. What's this all about?
Well, and stuck her with a bill for $1,400 in child care for her testimony because she had to travel to Washington. Kristen Davis has no knowledge of Russian collusion or WikiLeaks collaboration or any other illegal act on my part pertaining to the 2016 election or anything else, nor does anybody else who's been paraded in front of the grand jury. This is quite simple. There is no such evidence. There is no such witness who can testify truthfully to the contrary. I really do regard this, as the president says, as a witch hunt. That was a great report from your reporter, but it was all speculation. Guccifer 2.0, yes, I had an innocuous 24-word exchange with him on WikiLeaks direct message long after WikiLeaks had already published the allegedly hacked DNC emails.
So you're saying
innocuous,
there
meaningless.
would be no crime related to any alleged collusion, any talking to Guccifer, talking to WikiLeaks is at least what you're maintaining tonight. But as you know, in the case of Paul Manafort, who used to be, I believe you were partners in a firm here in Washington many years ago, wasn't recent. But bottom line, Paul Manafort, it doesn't appear, has anything to do with Russian collusion, but is facing potentially many years in jail for crimes that have nothing to do with the 2016 election. Do you fear you're next?
Well, it's certainly possible that a runaway federal prosecutor could conjure up some offense on my part in an effort to pressure me to testify against the president or to just silence me, because I have been, I think, an articulate critic of the partisan nature of the Mueller process. But as to any crime relating to the election, Russian collusion, WikiLeaks collaboration, or any other misdeed having to do with the 2016 election, no, and no other offense that I am aware of. On the other hand, the grand jury system is a very one-sided system. They ask you leading questions. Kristen Davis said this morning on Fox that when she tried to explain, they cut her off. When you give an answer they don't like, they cut you off. Well, no, I think if they bring a case against me, it will be a fabricated case, and there's no circumstances whatsoever, Ed, in which I will testify against the president.
We were just talking about Omarosa. She was on MSNBC earlier today and invoked you. Listen to this.
I think that Roger Stone right now is being investigated, and rightfully so. He has been one of those dark, shady characters in Trump world for a very long time, and I think that they have their sights set properly on him.
She calls you a dark, shady character. Does Omarosa know something about you that we don't? And by the way, do you know something about the president that you might tell Robert Mueller?
A, look in the mirror, Omarosa. You're the one who convinced the president to send a delegation to Haiti for the inauguration of the corrupt regime, the same people who ripped the country off after the earthquake, now with different frontmen. And you thought the president was great until you got fired. Now you say he's a racist. Secondarily, no, I have no information that would be negative towards the president, and I'm not going to make any up in order to get out of a tight spot if some false allegation is brought against me.
So I've got 15 seconds. So what's the bottom line here? Because it doesn't appear like Paul Manafort has been squeezed for months and months, facing a long time potentially in jail, or you have anything on the president. So why would the prosecutors be trying to squeeze you?
I think because I have been a very effective advocate on behalf of the president, because I'm the conservatives liberals love to hate. But Ed, there is no Russian collusion on my part. There is no WikiLeaks collaboration. There is no other illegal act pertaining to the 2016 election.
All right.
Those are the facts.
Roger Stone, we'll see if those facts hold up. We appreciate you coming in tonight.
Thank you.
All right. Meanwhile, after years of taking on unions and pushing conservative reforms, Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker may be the one Republican who gets Democrats in his state as agitated as the president does. So how's that played out in tonight's big Midwestern primaries? Who better to ask than our chief political anchor, Bret Baier? He's standing by live next. Plus, we'll find out if the domestic violence allegations against the top Democrat, Keith Ellison, affected his primary run. Results pouring in this hour as big primary elections take place in Wisconsin, Minnesota, Connecticut, and Vermont. Before we get to that, finally, a result from last week's primary. The Kansas governor, Jeff Collier, is conceding to immigration hawk and the Trump-backed candidate Chris Kobach after a very tight race. Team coverage right now, though, on tonight's big races. Chief political anchor, host of Special Report, Bret Baier, is here live, standing by with fresh analysis. Peter Doocy, Primary Pete, is in Wisconsin. But we begin with Chief Political Correspondent Mike Emanuel. We called him Main Street Mike last night, not Mean Street Mike. Live in Minnesota with the latest on top Democrat Keith Ellison facing scandal on this primary night. Good evening, Mike.
Well, Ed, good evening to you. Despite shocking allegations from a former girlfriend the weekend before primary day, Congressman Keith Ellison cruised to victory tonight here in Minnesota. Ellison was the strongest of 5 Democratic candidates running for Minnesota Attorney General in terms of name ID and campaign cash, but allegations of emotional and physical abuse by his former girlfriend, Karen Monahan, threatened to derail his candidacy at a critical stage ahead of the primary. A short time ago, Ellison was asked several times about the abuse claims, including by Fox, and he ducked the questions.
Well, they're not true, but tonight is about the victory, so we're going to focus on that. We'll be talking about this other stuff in the next few days. We're not trying to avoid the topic. We will handle it head on.
Ellison's former girlfriend and her son claim there is video evidence of the abuse. A Minnesota political analyst says if that is the case, it could be a ticking time bomb for Ellison's political career.
The real big issue now is whether or not his ex-girlfriend really does have a video, and how does this play out in the next few weeks? Because if a video does exist, that almost certainly ends his career. But even the allegations floating out there certainly raise questions for some people about let's say, his fitness to be AG.
The shocker of the night here in Minnesota came in the governor's race. Former Minnesota governor, a 2-term governor, Tim Pawlenty, losing his bid to return to the governor's mansion, losing tonight to Republican Jeff Johnson. That race called moments ago, and it was thought that Pawlenty was going to be a heavy favorite. Ed?
All right, Mike, we appreciate the report. Heading over to the state, everyone's got their eyes on tonight, Wisconsin. Republicans are choosing who will give Senator Tammy Baldwin a run for her money in November, and a seat crucial for Democrats to keep if they want to change the balance of power in the Senate in those midterms. Correspondent Peter Doocy live right now in Milwaukee. Good evening, Peter.
Good evening, Ed. In that race, the outsider candidate, businessman and Marine Kevin Nicholson, could not turn a huge fundraising advantage into a primary win. He just conceded a few minutes ago. They've already started to break down the stage. That means that the candidate who will face the incumbent Democrat, Tammy Baldwin, in November is going to be Leah Vukmir, who was the favorite of Paul Ryan and Scott Walker and Ryan Priebus and a lot of GOP establishment type folks here in Wisconsin. In another race, Wisconsin's Republican Governor Scott Walker did get a Democratic opponent tonight. It's the state's school superintendent, Tony Evers, who easily emerged from an 8-person Democratic field. Evers is an outspoken opponent of Walker's most famous legislation that reined in unions' collective bargaining power. And Evers also opposes a $10 billion electronics plant that Foxconn wants to build here. He accuses Walker, his soon-to-be opponent, of giving Foxconn a handout. Walker has already won 2 gubernatorial elections, and he did beat back a recall try, so Evers is going to have his hands full trying to make the 4th time a charm for Democrats in Wisconsin. Now, national Democratic leaders are also hoping to flip the seat being vacated by the retiring Speaker, Paul Ryan, and they found their candidate in November is going to be Randy the Iron Stash Bryce. Bryce announced his campaign in June by offering to trade jobs with the Speaker. He said he would go to D.C. and Ryan could go and work in the mines. That obviously never happened, but Ryan's handpicked successor, Brian Stile, also won tonight. He's a former Ryan aide, and he won by a sizable margin in the 1st district. So now Paul Ryan said in a statement that I will do everything I can to help his fall campaign and look forward to his victory in November. About $37 million was spent on the Republican side and the Democratic side in this primary. Republicans like their chances of flipping the seat because President Trump did win here in 2016. It obviously didn't go the way that the folks here at the Nicholson headquarters wanted to tonight, but now we know Leah Vukmir is going to be facing Tammy Baldwin, trying to flip the seat in November.
All right.
Ed?
Big race ahead. Peter Doocy, appreciate your reporting. Here with analysis, as promised, chief political anchor, hosts a special report right here on the Fox News Channel, Bret Baier. Good evening, Bret.
Hey, Ed.
So obviously what we're also looking at tonight is how this sets the mood, how this sets the table for 2020, looking down, as Peter mentioned, Wisconsin was something this president carried unexpectedly. Minnesota, where Mike is, that's a state where the president said, if they had only let me go there more, I told them I could win, and it was very tight in Minnesota.
Well, this race tonight with Tim Pawlenty losing to the county commissioner, Jeff Johnson, was fascinating because you had two guys who criticized President Trump, candidate Trump, on the campaign, and spent this campaign saying how much they didn't mean it and who didn't mean it the most. And Tim Pawlenty, a two-term governor, former governor, obviously former presidential candidate.
He was supposed to be one of the next big hopes in the Republican Party.
And had the biggest war chest, loses to this guy. And now this is going to be a head-up against the U.S. Democratic Congressman Tim Walz. He won tonight, and that'll be an interesting governor's race. Now, also in Minnesota tonight, the Minnesota State Senator Karen Housley, she won the Republican primary to fill the seat of Al Franken that was filled by Tina Smith, the then lieutenant governor, now sitting senator. Interesting about this is not on anybody's radar. It should be, because this race could be closer than people think. Housley is the wife of the Buffalo Sabres head coach Phil Housley, former Washington Capital, former NHL Hall of Fame.
You had to work the Stanley Cup caps in there.
And you know that hockey plays in Minnesota.
Absolutely.
So don't discount this race. It's not one that's on the front burner, but it could be one that is really close in the end.
And let's stay in Minnesota for a second, because Mike Emanuel mentioned Keith Ellison. This is not just about a state attorney general race. In the Me Too era, you have these allegations of domestic abuse that he has sharply denied, and he said he's going to talk more about it in the days ahead. We'll see. But this is somebody who's the first Muslim American elected to Congress and is a deputy DNC chair, a big party official, supposed to be a rising star, who's in a lot of trouble now.
Yeah, and I think you're going to see more questions now that he's over this hump. But it was really fascinating to watch the media coverage of this, or lack of coverage. You know, you had the allegations against Republican Congressman Chris Collins that he denies as well, that didn't have to do with domestic abuse. It had to do with finances. He was just clobbered in the media. This went kind of covered by large media outlets for a little while, and now, you know, he's addressing it, but he's won this primary. It could be an interesting race in the fall for Attorney General.
Something that's got a lot of coverage, some people believe too much coverage, is Omarosa. We just spoke to Katrina Pearson. Among the other things, here's what she said. Why didn't you tell me, Ed, you know, I don't know all the details of this book. I haven't seen it. But I did say, yes, he used the N-word to move the conversation along.
The first call that you're talking about, where she's claiming that I said that, was in a totally different call, where she was arguing with Lynn Patton about the existence of this tape. But let me explain something to you.
I'll give you one last thing,
Omarosa has been using this tape to manipulate people.
She's also using this tape to sell a lot of books. You have Katrina Pearson doubling down on the idea of using the word dog to describe or something the president did. And so for all they keep saying, you know, they don't want to focus and she's a liar and she's this, they're giving her more attention and they're selling a lot of books.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of needed a whiteboard for that discussion because there were a lot of things going on.
This one, that one.
But, you know, the bottom line is that they were trying to spin it originally. Then Omarosa comes out with tapes. It doesn't look good. And now they're trying to figure it out, and, you know, going forward. The whole thing is ugly. I said today that the president created his own vortex of controversy by the way he tweeted about it today. Obviously, I asked Kellyanne Conway about it on Special Report, and you did here tonight. I think it's not going away, but we'll see.
30 seconds we have. Where are we in the Mueller investigation? I mean, nobody can really figure out what's happening with the Manafort trial. There's been these weird delays. Now the defense is going to rest. Some people believe, legal analysts, that there could be a mistrial, maybe a problem with one of the jurors. These charges are tax and bank fraud, nothing to do with collusion in 2016.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. We're going to see tomorrow the closing statements. Obviously, the defense doesn't feel like the prosecutors made the bar, and they feel confident, or they're projecting that. I don't know what we don't know, but it's coming to a head, I think. And I think you heard Rudy Giuliani say that the negotiations may start after this trial moves forward. 5 seconds left, being the political junkie that I am.
Here comes the joke.
Okay, no. 4 of 6 states in New England currently are held by Republican governors. In progressive liberal New England, there could be a 5th. Connecticut. Tonight, businessman Bob Stefanowski wins the GOP nomination. The Democrat Ned Lamont won. This is Dan Malloy, the Connecticut governor, who is really unpopular, and it could be setting up for another Republican governor in New England. And we'll see.
Good stuff from Brett. I just remember when there was a special election in Pennsylvania, you were here with me late.
That's right.
And you said that Lamb won because he had the chops.
That's
all right.
I don't have that line tonight. I don't have
Brett Baer, appreciate it.
See ya.
Climate change has nothing to do with the California wildfires, so says Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke. So what's causing the blazes? That's the burning question for the Secretary and former Navy SEAL. He's here next to answer fresh questions after just coming back from touring that devastation. Some pretty disturbing details to tell you about tonight. More than 1,000 kids were sexually abused by some 300 priests over the past several decades. That's in Pennsylvania, where a grand jury says Roman Catholic leaders tried to cover it up. Correspondent Garrett Tenney picks it up from here. Hi, Garrett. We've seen this around the country, around the world, but this in particular in the state of Pennsylvania seems pretty jarring.
Yeah, and this was a very extensive investigation over the course of 2 years that looked into allegations of sexual abuse in 6 of the 8 dioceses in the state of Pennsylvania. And the grand jury laid out the significance of this report in their opening line, saying, quote, "We need you to hear this. There have been other reports about child sex abuse within the Catholic Church, but never on this scale." More than 1,000 child victims were identified in this 2-year investigation, but the real number of abused children is likely in the thousands. All of them raped in some way, and all of them brushed aside by church leaders who preferred to protect the abusers and their institution above all.
Priests were raping little boys and girls, and the men of God who were responsible for them not only did nothing, they hid it all for decades.
Church leaders even kept secret records of the abuse and cover-up going back more than 70 years. For example, one priest admitted to assaulting more than a dozen young boys, and the bishop wrote a letter thanking him for helping God's people. The grand jury identified more than 300 predator priests, but almost none will face prosecution due to statute of limitation laws. The report is also critical of Cardinal Donald Wuerl, the former Archbishop of Pittsburgh and now D.C., for his part in concealing the abuse. Allegations he denies. Others are suggesting, though, that these kinds of cover-ups could go all the way to the top of the Catholic Church.
If we're going to be serious about investigating how this could have happened, we have to go all the way to the Vatican to say, what did the Vatican offices, departments know?
Now, Pope Francis has been facing increasing pressure to crack down on sexual abuse within the church and cover up since he took office. Now, just in the last few months alone, several high-ranking church leaders have either gone to prison or resigned for their roles in these sexual assault cases.
All right, Garrett, thanks for going through all that. We appreciate it. Still to come. The Interior Secretary, Ryan Zinke, just got back from seeing firsthand the utter devastation of those California wildfires. He's here next from the president's cabinet to share what he saw and his differences with the California state authorities in preventing such disasters in the days ahead. The president's Interior Secretary, Ryan Zinke, just got back from the Golden State, where he saw firsthand the damage done by this devastating car fire, which is now ranked the state's 6th most destructive blaze. Interior Secretary Zinke is back here in Washington now and joins me. Mr. Secretary, we appreciate you being here.
Great to be with you. I tell you, I've been in Bosnia, I've been in Iraq, I've never seen anything like it. The level of destruction that this fire, when it gets that hot, way too much fuels.
We've seen these images and they're horrifying, but you actually were on the ground. Some of your own employees at the Interior Department, as I understand it, lost their homes. So people feel this in their bones. People feel this in their hearts. What did you see? What did you smell that we can't?
Well, you know, you walk up in a neighborhood. In one case, everything's gone. Yeah, they're in shock. Yeah, they're just crying and they've lost everything they've had. Another case, only standing house. You know, we were driving by. I said, "Stop the car. I got to get out and talk to the folks." They're out there in lawn chairs. The only house standing in the entire neighborhood, and they're just in shock. Wow. And then you drive neighborhood after neighborhood after neighborhood, and look, I've heard the argument about climate change. This is not about climate change. Yes, the seasons are getting longer, the temperatures are getting hotter, but whether you're a denier or a believer, it doesn't relieve you the responsibility to do something about the fires. Remove the fuel. We're talking about 120 plus trees dead in California from drought, from beetle kill, the density of trees.
And that's making all of this worse.
It is literally a time bomb. And we've been talking about this for years, going back to actively managing forests. That means prescribed burns in the shoulder season, mechanical extraction, thinning.
Clear out some of this so that it will not catch fire, so it will not get worse.
Yeah, that when you have a reburn, let's take this fire is now 300,000 acres. There is a lot of timber that actually can get salvaged and go into the timber mills, as long as you can do it in a year. But there'll be lawsuits by these radical folks that have locked up the forest, the same groups, by the way, that have prevented public access. And when you prevent public access, shut roads down, guess who doesn't have access? The forest fires.
Right.
So they got to bring in the
firefighters. And
the firefighters. That's right. They got to bring in bulldozers, and by that time,
they're doing brave work. Some of them have lost their lives. What's your message to environmentalists, the Sierra Club, and others about what needs to happen in terms of forest management that's not happening today?
Well, no one loves public land more than me. And I'm the steward of our public lands. I want people to recreate in the summer, rather than evacuate. I want to go back to healthy forests. That means let's get rid of the dead and dying timber. Let's protect the habitat. Let's make make sure the watershed's clean. But let's make sure also we do things smart, like, for instance, fire breaks where necessary.
Some of the fire officials, others, particularly environmentalists, some on the left, were scratching their heads when the president tweeted on August 6th a couple of things. One, California wildfires are being magnified and made so much worse by the bad environmental laws, which you just mentioned, which aren't allowing massive amounts of readily available water to be properly utilized. It is being diverted into the Pacific Ocean, must also tree clear to stop fire from spreading. In terms of the water issue, though, that the president tweeted about, PolitiFact did a check on this. Sure. And he said, among other things, the president, quote, appears to have conflated the state's real water controversy between farmers and environmentalists with the unrelated issue of firefighting. The state's fire agency, CAL FIRE, said it has not had problems accessing water. They went on to say, we rated the president's claim false.
Well, I would say this. The president's right, and it is about managing resources. You look at the water. California is advocating 40% natural flow. They're advocating in some camps to remove the dams. They're advocating for water to be redistributed, so 2/3 of our food is produced in the Central Valley.
But pardon me, but some of the brave firefighters you mentioned and praised a moment ago are saying that's not a reason that the president's wrong.
Well, the president's right about resources, managing resources. The water, I think, is a separate issue from the fires. A lot of times.
So he shouldn't have brought that in.
I think. Well, but remember, he said, let's make sure we cut trees. On the second part, had it been reversed.
I agree with all on that, but to be clear, on the water issue,
on the water issue, it's an example of not managing resources. So he's correct in that. On the fires, he's correct. But not only cutting trees, you have to thin, prescribe burns. The left will say there's only one variable, and that's do nothing. habitat global warming. So it's not global warming equals fires. The equation is much more complex. You have fuel load, beetle kill, disease, warming temperatures, and to fix this problem, that's thin, let's look at prescribed burns in the shoulder season, let's actively manage our forests rather than
this is something that you've been pushing for a long time. Obviously, our hearts go out to everyone on the ground fighting this, and we appreciate your efforts to get there and see this up close.
I can say the firefighters are doing magnificent jobs. I mean, we forget sometimes that while the forest is burning, their homes, their families in jeopardy, and yet they're in the front lines right out there fighting the fires.
The Interior Secretary, appreciate you coming in. Important work highlighted right there, and stick around. European leaders say they've never seen something like this before, but are they still ignoring the problem right before their eyes? That's the burning question, and that's next.